Hello and welcome to the latest webinar in the Elemental Talks program. Our topic today, the power at our fingertips, heating controls for zero carbon homes. This is the third session in our Zero Carbon Homes series, broadcast throughout this month in partnership with BEAMA, the UK Trade Association for Manufacturers and Providers of Energy Infrastructure Technologies and Systems. Your chair for the next 60 minutes, my name is Jim McClelland, founder and editor of SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the top 500 rankings. Joining me on the panel this afternoon are Remi Volpe, Vice President and General Manager, Residential Temperature Controls, Schneider Electric, and Chairman of the BEAMA Heating Controls Group. Rik Temmink, Chief Product Officer, Green Energy Options, often referred to as GEO. Richard Burrows, Director, the Smart Thermostat Shop, and Rob Whitney, Business and Technical Leader, Head Heat and Energy Resideo. It is all live, as you will see, with a Q&A to finish, so pop your questions in the box you probably find at the bottom of your screen. The clue's in the name, it's called Ask a Question. So if you pose them, I'll ask them. These guys will answer them. So a little bit about Elemental. This webinar forms part of a program of talks hosted and produced by Elemental, elementalexpo.com. It's the online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air, and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. You can find a full diary of events both on the website and on the Elemental Crowdcast page. There's a range of upcoming webinars, including 4 more sessions in this Zero Carbon Home series with BEAMA, supported by Glen Dimplex, Drayton Controls, Valent UK, Lucy Electric, Schneider Electric, and ABI. You can also view the back catalogue, broad range of topics, including the first 2 webinars in the series with BEAMA, all available on demand. And immediately after this session's finished, you can use the same link to rewatch it on demand. You can share that with friends and colleagues, so it's very easy to access. There's a who's who of great speakers in the back catalogue. Everything is free, and there's articles and news stories galore on the website, so lots of entertainment to enjoy. So, very brief intro from me, because we've got a lot to get through. So, the power at our fingertips, heating controls for zero carbon homes. Well, we all know meeting the UK net zero target calls for significant reductions in energy consumption across literally millions of homes throughout the country. So in this webinar, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the energy saving opportunity offered by heating controls. Now, the numbers: upgrading the bulk of the existing 27 million homes across the UK currently heated by gas to best practice controls has the potential, if you listen to this, to reduce UK CO2 emissions by 11 million tonnes a year, saving householders a whopping 2 billion on their fuel bills. So these are significant numbers. And we're going to be discussing the drivers, but also we're going to be acknowledging some of the deterrents as we look at the way forward for the market and the prospects for consumer uptake between now and way towards 2050. So our talk will draw on 2 key papers recently published by BEAMA, the BEAMA Heating Controls Manifesto, the power at our fingertips, plus the recent research they've had done with University of Salford into potential energy savings from load and weather compensation controls. Lots of good new material there. As mentioned, this is the 3rd session in our Super 7 on zero carbon homes with BEAMA and Elemental. They've come together to deliver a series of deep dive talks, retrofit towards 2050, installing low carbon heating, hitting those net zero targets, we hope. The reality is, as we're all well aware, we face a big delivery challenge. And these talks debate the options for our sector as we harness the opportunities, importantly, not just to cut emissions, also to provide better health and well-being in the home. So, enough from me, let the talks begin, right? So, as we start to explore the power at our fingertips, I'd like to start by asking our panel to introduce themselves, share some opening insights around the manifesto, the research published, as I mentioned, plus the market, and the need for a greater focus on heating controls as an energy efficiency measure in general. To kick us off then, first up, Remi, BEAMA's recently published its manifesto for heating controls. What, please, are the key takeaways you can share with us today?
Okay, so firstly, thanks for the introduction, and really pleased to be part of this particular session, which is very close to my heart as well. I think from the publications that have come out, the key themes for us are really, we wanted as an industry body to put research on the table that would really give some clear messages to the consumers, to the industry, to the installers. So what we have seen is that the research we did at Salford University, using their Energy House facility has demonstrated that significant energy savings can be delivered using and moving beyond the current minimum standard for heating controls. What that means is, we need to move beyond class 1 thermostats to a minimum of class 4, and look at how we can get some wider application usage of what we call class 5 and class 6, which is more around sort of modulating control. What we have seen is that there are increased savings from using these better control technologies of between 10 to 12%. At a time when consumers are facing up to higher costs, we think this is the perfect time to put controls onto the agenda in a way in which consumers can offset these increases as well. And we also, with these higher class of products, will be communicating with the boiler to optimize the overall efficiency of the system. And we want to ensure that the consumer can continue to have a wide choice of technology. And we want them to be using open protocols so that the heating can also work with the other forms of energy that's used in the home. The other element is that we already have best practices available today, which allows the consumer to save money as well. An easy win is using thermostatic radiator valves, or TRVs, on all radiators. We know that there's new building regulation requirements that are going to be meaning that TRVs are installed on all boiler replacements. And we also want to touch a little bit on balancing, that the overall heating system is balanced correctly, which ultimately can give greater comfort for the consumer, but also give greater efficiencies as well for the overall system. And I would say the final part is that smart controls can really deliver additional benefits for the consumers. The research we did and what the paper documents is we've seen 12% savings from the best practices using room thermostats, 19% savings from good practice on individual room controls, and 5% from a smart programmable room thermostat. So, there's a lot of details in there, but I would say the overriding theme is that as an industry, the guidance that we're putting in there can help consumers make considerable savings and really sort of help them manage some of the challenges that they're currently facing with utility costs increasing.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very nice introduction there, Remi. And as you say, the context, everybody is aware of the issue with gas prices going up. So as you say, it's always timely, but it couldn't be more topical right now as the weather's getting colder. Keywords already in play. We've heard you talk about metrics, data, standards, mentioning class 1 to class 4, even 5 and 6, savings 10 to 12%, proper double-digit numbers. And you talked about best practice. This isn't unproven. This is not uncharted territory. We know how to do some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff, but it's an integrated, balanced approach and opportunities with smart. So, and a nice point at the end, ultimately, it is about helping the consumers. If it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work ultimately. So lots of nice points already in play. So moving then now to Rob, in support of that manifesto, just mentioned, BEAMA's also had tests carried out at Salford Uni, as I said, on load and weather compensation. Could you tell us a bit more about that and share some of that research output with us, please?
Yeah, no problem. This has been a debate, a passionate debate that's been going on for many years amongst installers, particularly about the difference between standard controls and what's called compensation controls. And the two different sorts being weather and load compensation. The main benefit being with either type that they match the heat output from the boiler and into the heating system, depending on how much load there actually is. And the weather compensation works on outside temperature, the load compensation on inside temperature. And there are combinations of the both available as well. So we really wanted to understand, using these existing proven technologies that are already commercialized in the market, what the differences were, what the pros and cons were, and the sort of magnitude of the savings that could be done by applying these simple proven technologies. So we got together as working group with pulled in the BEAMA members, pulled in the Open Therm Association, and obviously partnering with Salford University with their test facility, which is a a real house, not even a scale house, a real house in an environment controlled chamber. And we ran a series of tests comparing the different types of controls from your standard class 1 on off through class 4 load compensating on off to full modulation, load compensation, and full modulation weather compensation controls. We then repeated those tests with a boiler which was less oversized, which was kind of more right-sized for the property, and actually that was tuned for the property as well, in terms of its range rating, matching its pump speeds to the load. And as Remi said, we made particular effort and particular care on how the system was balanced to make sure that the return temperature was as low as possible. And what that series of tests told us was that, yes, indeed, as thought, these enhanced controls save on average between 10 and 12% over the old school on-off controls. So by applying best in class, best technology products, there's a 10% saving at least, and maybe even more when you start to add in features like smart control, which weren't even part of the test. So the tests were covering activities of the controls that happen automatically in the background without any special user interaction. So these are things that the installer would set up and it would just work.
Excellent stuff. So there we have beyond on off kind of, we have standard and compensation, we have weather and load, pros and cons, and of course, as you suggested, you could test. That's the beauty of this, the excellent energy house facility they have at Salford and various others. You can really test the hypothesis and test the suggestions and test the materials. So right sizing and tuning mentioned again, system balance. There is a degree of sophistication, and we'll maybe come around later to how accessible some of that is and whether that's an obstacle for consumers in some respects, but we'll get into perhaps some of the detail of it as we come around to the second round of questions. But first now, I'd like to come to Richard, and from an installer's perspective, my first question to you really is, are the skills there for these more sophisticated controls, or is more guidance and training needed?
It's always an interesting question, but yeah, ultimately the knowledge is the thing that's missing from most installers, unfortunately, because we as we know, the general type of control out there at the moment is on-off switching control, and that's been implemented over many years, and unfortunately it makes the legislation and things like that hasn't been in place at the time to make sure that modulation controls were pushed forwards. So the issue is that, yes, modulation controls are very easy to fit, but there are some key things you need to kind of do with modulation controls to ensure that you get the best out of them. So some of that is behind system design. So as Rob mentioned at the Salford tests, the phase 1 boiler tests, they were kind of just as you found it, kind of a system that was just upgraded with a advanced control, modulation control. But then the phase 2 tests, they were going from that to a boiler that was well tuned, well defined for the property. And it's that tuning and definition of that appliance and the correct sizing of the heat emitters, and then balancing, setting up the thermostat and the load compensation, weather compensation correctly for the correct property. Those are the things that are the skills required in the installers to, ensure that overall efficiency is there. And I think currently right now that isn't there, which then kind of poses a little bit of a problem as we go forwards, because if we're not getting those gas boilers and controls set up and tuned right now on gas boilers, what kind of hope are we going to have if we go over to heat pumps? We at the moment we're in a very fortunate position where most boilers are oversized. Okay, so you can get away if you get the system design wrong, or the thermostat tuning wrong, or the boiler definition incorrect, not range rated correctly, things like that. You can get away with it to a certain extent, with only the negative thing being obviously the energy wastage perspective. I mean, when we come to heat pumps though, these systems have to go in correctly. They are going to have to be right, and the system design and the controls to marry up with those systems will have to be correct as well. So right now, it's kind of one of those things. The training you can do the training on the gas boilers, because if you do get the system design slightly wrong, it's not great, but it's fine. You can get away with it a little bit. And that's where right now we need to start getting these things right, getting the training on board, going out there, and this can be supported by manufacturers as well, just to make sure that the guys out there, they're doing a great job every day, just bring it up to that next level to ensure that energy efficiency and the energy wastage is reduced, and that's kind of where we are at the moment with it.
Excellent. So knowledge gap, the controls are easy to fit, but as you suggested, it's the sophistication, the tuning, the sizing, the setup. Could I just ask you as a follow-up there, obviously there is currently a skills gap or a knowledge gap, and often you get this chicken and egg scenario where the industry is waiting for a signal from government, often for money, and maybe manufacturers are. We've got obviously news about heat pumps coming out this week today. But are you seeing the industry, albeit belatedly, gearing up with training, or honestly, are you not even seeing the training coming on stream much yet? So
the irony behind all this is that the training, the skill training at the moment is being done by individuals in their own homes. Do you know what I mean? And
right.
And it's not effectively being led, in my opinion, not being effectively led from the front by the manufacturers and the boiler manufacturers, the heat pump manufacturers, things like that. There just is not the facilities in place right now to ensure the level of competence that's required to push all this forward. That's a fact. However, installers are very interested in, once they learn about the technologies. So if they've been fitting manufacturer-led boilers and manufacturer-led controls, maybe class 1 or class 4 controls have passed. It's not a difficult change to get to the class 5 or 6. But the fears in the industry, I think, is that the customer education is not currently there for them to expect what happens in a modulation system, like not boiling hot radiators, systems not heating up in half hour. All the key things that kind of happen when there's an energy wastage scenario and the systems aren't designed or specified to run at low temperature levels that modulation controls will, effectively do. Then it's the whole thing. It's the customer needs to have that expectation that will be like that. The installer then doesn't have a hard time in selling those controls or that boiler package or that design correctly. And the whole thing should just literally fall into place. But without that lead from the front, and I think it's key consumer knowledge and education first of what they need to expect with a modulation low temperature system, then the installers, suppliers, manufacturers, they're all just going to have that hard time all the way through from start to finish.
Excellent. And we hear what you're saying. And of course, it's change, and with change requires a big communication piece. And as you say, often there isn't the leadership necessarily, or just the sheer time and effort and volume of communication, because it needs to happen everywhere from everybody more than once. As we know, it's a constant scenario. And in a way, this brings us very nicely then to the last round of questions with Rik, because my question to you is, when it comes to the actual controls themselves, is there an issue with user friendliness for the consumer? And if so, are smart controls the answer?
Yeah, I think my answer to that would be that, there are very different types of consumers. And if you go back, 10 years in time when the first smart thermostats arrived on the market, they were very, very much focused at early adopters, people who were tech savvy. They wanted to buy this technology. They were excited about technology. They're willing to invest time, probably not read the manual, but they would be able to work out what all the features, all the advanced features were. So the products that exist in the market today, are definitely, fit for purpose for that user category. They do wonderful, amazing things for people, and those people are excited about them because they love technology. So examples of that would be, you set a geofence on your smartphone app around your home, and when you're leaving that geofence, the system knows you're away, so it can turn down, and as you're re-entering that 30-mile radius or whatever, it recognizes you're on your way home and it switches your heating on. Works great for people who are willing to set up the right geofence. Other great example would be a feature called approach timing, where when you set the schedule to make it 20 degrees at 7 a.m., it will actually look at the indoor temperature and outdoor temperature, and on a particular winter day, it'll work out that your heating needs to come at 4:27 to get to 20 degrees by 7 a.m. Works great for people who understand that, but for people who don't have that tech savvy and maybe didn't even ask for the smart thermostat to be installed, but they inherit it in the home, or their energy retailer makes it available to them for, free of charge because they're in a kind of fuel poverty situation or something like that. Those people may go, well, I set my schedule 20 degrees at 7 a.m. Why is my boiler firing at 4:27 in the morning and waiting for kids up? I just don't get this. And of course, then the logical reaction is those people say, find the off button, turn the thing off. I don't want this. So then you've kind of gone in the wrong direction with those customers. That customer is not getting the benefits because they simply didn't understand it. So it's very much horses for courses. And I think as an industry, we still kind of have a tendency to design for that early adopter customer who loves the great technology we can build. And we don't necessarily always think about that mainstream customer who, like I said, may just get this technology without them putting money on the table for it. And they probably less engaged, almost definitely less engaged. And we need to bring those customers into a situation where they get the benefit from that technology. And I think Rob mentioned it already. It's making sure that we bring consumers with us and make systems work properly without the user having to invest time in tuning and setting the right settings and reading manuals and doing all those things that, again, early adopters probably happy to do, but that's not what the mainstream customer is. So I think that is also reflected in the BEAMA manifesto that, yes, there is a best practice, and we want to push bring as many people with us to that best practice where we have the latest technology doing the best possible job in a home, but we also have to respect that that isn't achievable for everyone. And as an industry and as a country, if we can get better control technology into 90% of homes in the UK from probably 10-20% today, that would make a massive difference to energy consumption and carbon emissions.
Absolutely.
So if we can work together, and that's definitely a discussion that my company Green Energy Options is having with the ministry, BEIS, with the Energy Savings Trust, with all sorts of other organizations, if we can get the right control technology installed correctly in 70, 80, 90% of homes, the aggregate benefit of that would be massive.
Excellent. There's some very good points there. I mean, we've had this discussion around a number of green technologies or low carbon, if you like. Of course, the innovation is important, but it's a scale game ultimately. Those kind of big numbers we heard at the start, to hit any of those kind of targets, those millions, literally, and billions, it has to be mass market approach. And as you say, it has to be super user friendly. And, the old adage is always make it easy, make it really easy. I mean, even back in the day when there were video recorders and they were arriving in homes, a lot of people didn't know how to use half the functions on them, couldn't set the timer to record the match when they were out and stuff, etc. So a lot of people just never got to grips with some of the functions available, so which seems quaint now, but at the time it was just unfamiliar. So as you say, the worst case scenario is you lose their confidence or interest and they just start switching off or deciding the thing's just too difficult and is a headache, when they're busy and running around and trying to manage a home and a family potentially. So and that brings, if you like, to this middle section. And I see already when we go to the audience queue at the end, I see Gareth has already kicked us off with a question. So do use that little box at the bottom probably of your screen, ask a question, type it in there. And you'll see also in the chat, thanks to Colin from BEAMA, he's put in the links for the Heating Controls Manifesto. He's also put in a link for the full technical report from Salford Uni. So all those stats and all those findings you were getting a taster of earlier, you can view, download, etc. The full documents there to really get stuck into the detail following this session. So in the middle then, this is an open round. And so I'll just like zoom in a bit on specifics, look at some of the challenges, the opportunities, the heights we're going to scale, the hurdles we're going to overcome. So Remi, Rob, Richard, Rik, it's a kind of fingers on buzzers round. You don't literally have buzzers, but you get the gist. So first up, which follows kind of from what we've just been saying, is enough being done to help consumers identify how much energy they can actually save with better heating controls? Do they understand the numbers? And is enough being done to help them get a grip on what it means to them?
Well, maybe I'll start. I think the answer to that is no. We always can do more. I think that the aspect of educating the consumer generally is repetition. So I think what I feel is that the reports that we've published today with BEAMA form the basis upon which the whole industry can start to educate the consumer about it. That it's a set of data that's, as I say, been independently verified. Mm-hmm. Tries to be clear in terms of articulating what benefits the consumer can have. And, I do think this is sort of, as I know, as a heating industry group, we wanted to get something in the hands of the installer to give them allow them to give a consistent message, a fact-based message into the consumer, and help, in those face-to-face interactions, help the consumer understand the benefits of better controls and of smarter controls. So hopefully what we're doing today is a step towards making the consumer be better educated, be better informed, and hopefully, putting the installer and continuing to keep the installer as one of the educators, one of the key educators of the consumers, and helping them along this journey to how they can save money.
Sure. And if I could ask a little follow-up there for you, Remi, do you agree with kind of Richard's suggestion earlier that communication piece primarily has got to come from the manufacturers? Is it their job? Is it the onus on them to do the majority of the work here?
I think the onus is on the industry, anybody who's a player in there. Yeah. And I think that's where, the work that BEAMA's done, I've been sort of, encouraged to get behind, because if it purely comes from one manufacturer, then there's an element of, is it sort of commercially biased, or is there a sort of an agenda there? I think as we do things as BEAMA, and the role that BEAMA can play to pull the manufacturers together to make us sort of, collaborate and put this information out to the market, hopefully comes across better as well. So I think we all have a role to play. As a manufacturer, we have a leading role to play in that. And I think where we collaborate and where we talk with the same voice, hopefully it's going to be, have a little bit more credibility and drive that education hopefully quicker.
And Rob, could I bring you in? You've maybe you've been waiting for heating controls to become the hot topic, as it were, pun intended. Yeah. If this is their moment, or the beginning of their moment, who are you looking to lead the charge, to drive this agenda, and just to get the help out there fast?
Sure. I mean, as Remi says, it's got to come from all the stakeholders in the industry, really. And that comes from the very top, comes from government, comes from players like the Energy Savings Trust, but it also comes from peer to peer as well. And what we've got to really recognise with these changes that we're looking at making is that they may seem like big steps for us in the UK, but this is standard practice in continental Europe. Yeah. We're many years behind the standard practice, the standard level in Europe. So really, when condensing boilers came out in 2005, nothing really changed about how they were installed, with the controls that they were installed with, or the working practices of how they were installed. And this sort of missed 10, 15 years has kind of been a problem. That's why it feels like such a jump now. And very much we're kind of still stuck with the old school way of having separate time clocks and stats running for 2 hours in the morning and 5 or 6 hours in the evening. And that's certainly how we replicated the tests on there. But the best way to run your heating is low and slow, and keep it ticking over with only a few degrees setback overnight, or when you're not around, you're not in the home. And that starts to enable much better efficiency, because it's like when you're driving your car, you don't want to be flooring it and standing on the brakes all the time. You want to be accelerating and decelerating smoothly. And that's what these advanced controls and lower temperature flow from the appliances really falls into. So yeah, it's a case of, pushing that proven existing technology out there, and a big education point, as Remi said, the current experience of having really high temperature heating to the lower temperature radiators, it is a consumer journey, and you need to speak about that from experience. So I'd encourage the installers to change these these controls in their own homes first, and get expert at them before recommending to their clients.
Yeah, and good point that these are hard habits that have to be broken up to a point. The way people have done things for decades is not the way to do it in future. And so that is a jump, that is a shift. That's behavior change. And I think we need to be realistic that those practices, people won't change without a good reason and without some information. And ideally, some examples. I mean, the fastest way we all know for something to go is if your neighbor, your friend, your family member, whatever, they start just telling you, well, I've done it. I've got a similar house to you, blah, blah, etc. I've saved this, I've done that, word of mouth like that, and things can really catch fire. But you need more than just those hardcore early adopters that Rik mentioned. I think, it's great, the techies, the enthusiasts, maybe in a good way, the nerds who want to really go to town on this stuff, but getting out into the mass market, it needs to be communicated easily between friends and in the pub and everywhere else as to how to do it. So the second question then in this maybe challenges bit. So I don't know, maybe Richard, you could, is it easy to retrofit the types of controls we're talking about? Or will we encounter situations where they're not practical, they're not advisable? What's the risk of exceptions to the rule that start putting people off and putting installers off?
Good question, but ultimately, I think controls, especially the modulation controls, a lot of them are bus or open therm, controls, and it's 2 wires. So an existing heating system that's had a centralized thermostat on class 1 on off, on an S plan system or a Y plan system, and wired up that way, has got plenty of scope to be changed to a modulation technology, because you're going from something that's got five cores or more to the between the boiler and the main control panel, to something that's going to have 2 cores. So we're going to have enough infrastructure in most properties to convert them over from modulation technology, from on-off technology over to modulation technology. The biggest hurdle comes is when we start talking about system boilers. Okay, so when we go from, because combi boilers are really easy to kind of get from on-off controls over to modulation controls, because especially if we're using wireless technology where, the bus control or the open therm control, or the control itself is plugged directly into the boiler and then changes it over to a modulation technology, that's really easy. But then where we come from with system boilers, we've actually got to change the behavior of the system to accommodate for the low temperature controls. So let me explain what I mean by that. So when we're talking about modulation technology, what we're talking about is controls that can adjust the flow temperature of the heating system to bring the boiler into condensing mode more often. Okay, but the issue comes versus S-plan or Y-plan systems, where when we have hot water recovery, we now don't want that extra temperature hot water now flowing through our radiators that might have been 40 degrees Celsius. Yeah, so when we come to recharge the cylinder, what we're having to do with modulation technology control is have a different style for setting up the boiler as far as the design goes. And a lot of it that's coined about in the industry at the moment is priority hot water. Okay, it doesn't mean the hot water is a priority over the heating. What it actually means, it's a method of ensuring the hot water is recovered at one temperature, which is a hotter temperature. And then once the hot water is recovered, then it goes back to a low flow temperature, which then goes around the radiator circuit again. And to achieve that, there is a level of system design to ensure that. Some boilers out there can do it with 2 pipes going into a 3-port diverter, or changing the configuration of the S-plan to work with that. Other boilers have to do it with a 3-pipe or a 4-pipe system. So then there's the accommodation of that system design into that customer's property, which might be difficult if the airing cupboard has 2 pipes from the boiler to it up to the airing cupboard, and then all the controls are in the airing cupboard. So there is a level of detail here, and I got to echo that obviously combi boilers are the most popular boiler in the UK market. But as we transition over to heat pumps, we're going to be going back to cylinder-based systems. Okay, so a lot of the system boilers out there that want to transition first into modulation controls have got this little step to do. But irrespective, even if we do it with combi boilers, it's going to be a bigger step still again. So we've got to try and get used to what we can do on gas boilers with modulation controls and what we need to do to achieve those control upgrades and the system upgrades, only because we're going to have to do it as soon as we go into heat pumps anyway.
Excellent. And I see now the questions are beginning to stack up. So this will be the last little bit from me, and then we'll go over to the audience. Rik, I wonder if I could ask you, I was going to ask about sort of boiler plus requirements introduced a few years ago. Have they changed how installers and consumers think about heating controls? But I was also going to ask, as we've heard, obviously, if heat pumps are the future, what about the tactics? If the drive is towards low carbon heating, is it still worth upgrading heating controls on gas boilers? So in terms of the journey, Rik, from what we've learned about the changes already happening with heating controls, but the impending bigger changes perhaps with heat pumps, where do you think we are on that journey in terms of market confidence and people wanting to upgrade today? Or are they a bit like somebody waiting for the new MacBook? Are they going to wait till further down the line and upgrade their system more substantially?
Yeah, I would definitely say that, and I totally agree with what Richard said. There will be cases where you have to think twice before you upgrade your heating controls as an interim step on the way to a heat pump, maybe in 10 years' time. But there are many properties that are really low-hanging fruit. People are spending £700 a year on gas for heating, adding a control which is probably a half-hour job in addition to your boiler service and costs you £100 or a bit more. The business case for doing that over a 5-year period is just very compelling, even for people who may not wake up every morning worrying about the climate. They will probably, especially with the way gas prices are going, they will be worrying about the costs that they're heating.
Do you think those sort of compelling numbers you wheeled out there, do you think the industry is actually getting that simple payback message across, that it doesn't cost much, you get your money back in no time? Is it that simple? I mean, surely that's a no-brainer. That's book your appointment now.
Yeah, I think it differs. Of course, there are more expensive systems, control systems, where historically the marketing message has been aimed at early adopters, and their cost probably isn't the low cost isn't the number one feature you talk about in your marketing. But definitely our business, we sell our technology mainly through energy retailers, and we do in-home displays as well as smart thermostats. So we're definitely talking to our energy suppliers, our direct customers, and they're very much thinking ahead now. With the massive price increases coming, they're going to have to help their consumers to deal with this, and they're very much thinking about, okay, alongside my smart meter installation in this home, can I fit a simple smart thermostat, just a replacement for a wired thermostat to start with? The smart meter installer should be able to do that. We still need to install smart meters in 17 million homes in the UK, so it gets us to the mass market. There are ways and means of getting, good practice controls into over 10 million homes over the next 3 years or so. And I think definitely from my business, that is our focus. We need to make that happen. The answer can't be, let's wait until heat pumps arrive in the majority of homes before we address this. It's carbon emissions from domestic, from homes, is a massive part of our carbon footprint in the UK, and there is a solution, at least a part mitigation to this, and we should be jumping on that right now to make it happen. Not just saying that as a maker of smart thermostats, but the business case is so obvious.
You
I
can
do
do the
Can I
right.
just follow
do
up
the right
briefly
thing.
on that
Sure.
point, please, before we move on? So I've recently had a heat pump installed at home. Replaced a very, very good modulating system boiler that was run on priority system, as Rich described. And also it was multi-zone system as well. So absolute best in class. I didn't need to change the heating control for a new one to suit the heat pump, because the system I had was future proofed. There were very, very small changes made to it. The firmware was updated over the air to make it heat pump capable. So don't be afraid of investing in best in class controls, because they will be future proof.
That's a nice point about de-risking
agree
it,
with that.
Remi. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of controls manufacturers are now, updating products, as Rob said, to make them heat pump compatible. So I think that aspect of future proofing shouldn't hold people back. I think what would help though as well, and we've spent 40 minutes talking about the benefits of better controls. What might help give that final push into the consumers is if the government did put some financial incentives as well that made heating controls one of the primary measures, that if you install smarter controls, because you can make these considerable savings, maybe that's the thing that then pushes, more adoption of better control. So I think that's something else we want to try and do as an industry, and say, why not incentivize them? The data's there, the research is there, the savings are solid. We can future-proof them in terms of making sure they're suitable for use with heat pumps. Hey, government, give us a little bit of an extra push, let the consumer sort of, do that. And I think the adoption would be much greater then.
Yeah, well, that would be, that's on the wish list. I'd like to be more optimistic than that, but it's definitely on the wish list. But no, good point. That extra push could really accelerate demand. And so this is where I'm going to open matters up to our virtual floor live Q&A. So as I said, keep the questions coming. You can type them in the ask a question box at the bottom of your screen there. The odd chat or point of information goes in the side panel if you just want to share a link or answer a little technical detail on the side. So pop your questions in the bottom. So if we go to the questions, then the first one is from Gareth, who says, isn't the benefit of using TRVs to cool certain rooms offset by extra heat loss to internal rooms or by open doors? So I wonder if somebody would like to comment on using TRVs. Are the benefits offset, pluses and minuses? Who's going to take that? Richard, you're pulling a face there. Is that because you want to answer this?
No, I mean the ultimate goal of any heating control, including TRVs, is ensuring we're not wasting any energy. So it's the energy wastage of a property that causes the extra bills, that's the main goal of a heating control. So irrespective of whether it's a TRV or a smart stat or any type of smart measure implementation, the ultimate goal is to reduce energy wastage. So if you look at some of the test results from the BEAMA report that's been put on the feed, what you can see is where the air temperature internally was trimmed correctly and accurately, that's where the bulk of the savings were made. So when the controls were directly compared, what you can see is the class 1 controls, even with TRVs fitted, because in each situation, the TRVs remained static. So they were set to their the same point. But the differentiator was the energy wastage reduction. That's where the savings were made. So class 1 overshot the air temperature of the reference room massively, where your class 5 and your class 6 controls didn't. They accurately maintain the air temperature within that property. So what you can actually take away from that is if you want to save energy, you need controls that can accurately control the system. I mean, ultimately, the biggest energy saving you can make in the home is to make it a low temperature system. So if you have a gas boiler, it runs at reduced flow temperatures, into the system, and that puts the boiler into condensing mode a lot deeper than it would be, say, if you were to design a system for 70-50, which is kind of the recommendation at the moment. But hopefully in the future, it's 50 degrees or 55 degrees flow temperature into the system, which will then reduce the return temperatures back to the boiler and give more efficiency, because that's the only way we can make current gas boilers more efficient. So TRVs are great. They do serve a purpose, but ultimately we're trying to reduce the energy wastage into the property and the overshooting of the target temperatures, and that's where the energy saving is made.
Good stuff. I see some nodding of heads from your fellow panelists. And we've got another question here from Malcolm Watkinson. Simple one, points to an awful lot of what we've just been talking about. Where is the best place to get training in these new heating controls, especially heat pump controls, as an installer? So I wonder if all of you on the panel just throw out any names, ideas. So if you're looking for training, whatever level you're at, whether you're new to this or whether you feel you have a reasonable bit of knowledge, but you need to fine tune and get that extra kind of expertise, where should people be going to find the training?
Well, we've been doing training for controls for decades, okay? And over the last 10 years in particular, that's evolved to meet the new technologies for things like open therm controls, and latterly heat pump controls, because we've recently done some big updates on our thermostats to make them particularly suitable for heat pumps and for cooling applications. So we're already doing that training. The appliance manufacturers also offer training, but theirs is obviously more focused on the appliance than specifically on the controls. And there's also specialist training provided by people like Rich and Kim Betty, people like that, from an installer's perspective, which is really, really good because they're obviously sharing peer-to-peer knowledge of what it's like to install and commission these systems. Because really the key to all this stuff isn't just you fit this magic box and it works. It's tuning it all together. So with the heat pumps particularly, they need a lot more care than even a gas boiler in the commissioning side. And from my experience of how heat pumps are being installed, that care and attention isn't there good enough yet. And a lot of the companies are still on a big learning curve themselves. So peer-to-peer from the experts in the industry is where you need to go to.
I'd sort of absolutely concur with Rob. I think, all manufacturers and, Drayton as well, we've updated our training material. We're trying to make it also available through Facebook and through sort of social media channels to try and make it a little bit easier to fit in with when an installer can do the training. And as Rob said, I think control manufacturers and the appliance people are busy doing and putting together some training material. I think as an industry as well, and it's another topic that we want to, maybe get BEAMA involved as well, to sort of say, well, where else can they go? Where can installers go or consumers go to actually learn a little bit more about, the heat pumps and the training. So I think it's another area where as an industry, we need to try and sort of have the collateral or the material, should I say, available at a time and a place when the installer, wants to do the training. And then it's not just a one-off, if they need a refresher, let's make sure that is available online, that they can go and sort of, do that, etc. So I think still work to do, but we're all trying to sort of move in that direction.
Sure, there's help needed with the general signposting. So, and do you feel then, obviously there are proprietary systems and dedicated kit and product and training, etc., and approved installers, but do you feel the industry as a whole, do you feel there's a collaborative ethos? Do you think, this tide is lifting all boats? Is there a willingness to kind of help the general upskilling, or is it still quite siloed in terms of different systems, different kit, different even areas of the country?
I believe there is a general willingness for collaboration. The change that we're talking about is so extensive, that as an industry, I think we all need to play a part, and we can help this journey, this transition, which has to happen by, ultimately working as one. So I think where there are proprietary systems, where people are sort of trying to limit the consumer's choice, that's sort of really, I would hope that's not the spirit that we want, given that, that type of approach was what was done, it's so 1980s, What we really have to do is to embrace, and what I think the consumer would want is that sort of open element, would like to see an industry collaborating. So whether it's a control manufacturer or an appliance manufacturer or a cylinder or a smart meter, that as an industry, we're working together and trying to make this transition. a little easier.
Excellent. And on that point, we've got one last question, perhaps from Jack Jones, who sort of asks about what adjacent industry do you believe needs improving the most to help meet these targets? For instance, Jack says mass heat pump installation are almost redundant if the building industry continues to produce cheaper, high heat loss properties. So just in terms of that collaboration piece, obviously this sector, building services, is not separate from the wider construction and property sectors and all those other allied trades and those other drivers and those other markets. So just widening out a little bit, Remi, that collaboration you talked about, what are the opportunities for collaborating with the house builders and the wider construction sector so that effectively you get, a whole that's greater than some of the parts and everybody wins?
Yeah, that's a challenge because they've built business models where it is very much driven on cost, and the approach that we're trying to take is more around building regulations or building standards, and I think that's probably one approach to take. I think, invariably, house builders and others will be focused around doing what they have to do. And if it's built around best practice on the topics we've been talking about, then great. But, I do think building regulations has to be one way.
And I think the government definitely has a fabric first type approach, focused very much on making sure that existing homes have a better standard of insulation and new built homes are better. And that's great. And it's the best way to reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions. But as Remi mentioned just now, some of the subsidy schemes and incentive schemes, they kind of don't help themselves or help the nation by specifying to you, for instance, you can't get compensated for adding a smart control unless you're doing a bunch of other measures. And I think that is actually, in some cases, counterproductive, because if we make it simple for somebody, like an installer, to go in and say, well, I'll do your boiler service, I can add a control. Here's a way to get some money back off that control because you're making your home more energy efficient. That would be good. And again, not saying that in a partisan way, because all of us have a financial interest in selling more controls, but the business case makes such a lot of sense in terms of reducing the energy profile or energy consumption of a home and the carbon footprint.
That's very, very true. Managing this dramatic or fairly radical change and this swift growth, there is a danger of unintended consequences, conflicting incentives, disincentives, which basically just mean the different sectors are tripping over each other in their enthusiasm to try and, right business and make good things happen. So speaking of making good things happen, we've talked a lot about the challenges and the problems. Last 5 minutes then, I wonder if I could ask you, go around the panel maybe just for a minute each. So let's have a bit of a reasons to be cheerful, positive note. So we've looked at how difficult it is, but fast forward maybe 5 or 10 years. I'm going to start with you first, Rob, and then walk it around. Fast forward 5 or 10 years, what will success look like for the industry in heating controls? So let's assume it's gone well. Some of the things we've talked about are happening in a big way. What will success look like 5 or 10 years? Or what would you like it to look like 5 or 10 years down the line, Rob?
I mean, you've only got to listen to the news to say that, the whole mass electrification of heat is now inevitable. It will be a mix of technologies. It won't just be heat pumps. There's other electrified technologies out there and still being developed. Obviously, the quick wins for today are getting the boilers that we've got working as efficiently as possible, reducing the waste as much as possible. And as we've described today, the technologies are already out there, already commercialized and proven to do that very, very easily. So 10 years time, we'll all have boilers that are tuned and optimized the best they can be, and we'll already be a long way advanced to rolling out at scale low carbon heating in all its various forms, both electrified, decarbonized gas, and things like district heat.
Excellent. Rik, it's gone well. 5 or 10 years down the line, what are we looking at?
Yeah, for me, it would just be everyone getting the benefits of this technology without them even having to think about it. Really lowering the barriers to adoption, but also especially the barriers to getting the benefits out of this technology. So good technology that runs itself, does the right thing, doesn't require the consumer to be tech savvy or be super engaged.
Nice point. Richard, if I come to you then, 5-10 years, what are your expectations with your rose tinted specs on?
I'd want to see something led from the front, to be honest. So I'd like to see government legislation in place that, you know, brings smart technology, smart thermostats to the forefront to make sure that the systems that are installed, whether it be new build property or existing property, those barriers are brought down and made, you know, there's a practice of, you know, best practice, not just good, because the problem is good only gets you so far. Best practice has to be sought. You know, you can't sort of aim low with this. We've got to aim really high and hopefully get where we need to go. That's how I kind of like to see it anyway. And obviously from installer perspective, just a lead in there, you know, a proper nod in the right direction, because a lot of the installers out there want to do that. You know, they want to do this when they discover the smart controls. And like I said, Rob mentioned, we do training. And when you see the light bulbs go off in their heads, that this technology is actually easy to do. It's easier to implement than their existing controls like S-Plan or Y-Plan were to implement. And that actually the benefits that all come from modulation technology, all that just leads to this path. That's kind of where I want to be.
Excellent, and a nice call for ambition and aspiration. You know, it's okay for us to want to go far, fast, bringing everybody with us. So final minute word there to you, Remi. So
very quick,
5-10 years. Go on, sell it to us. What's your picture?
So I would say mass adoption of best practice technology that is easy to use, and secondly, we significantly reduce our CO2 emissions and put ourselves on track to deliver carbon neutrality.
Fantastic. Well, what a positive note to end on there. So in closing, big thank you to all our panelists, Remi, Rob, Richard and Rik, plus of course our series partners at BEAMA. Also to yourselves, our virtual audience out there on Crowdcast, for your comments in the chat and your questions in the bottom. Reminder to check out elementalexpo.com, the online community for professionals focused on innovation in heat, water, air and energy, the vital elements within the built environment now and in the future. As I said at the top of the show, full diary of events on the Elemental website, host of upcoming webinars and 4 more sessions, 1 I think Friday, 3 next week, to come in this Zero Carbon Home series with BEAMA. So check out the program, and in case you missed the ones that happened already and you want to rewatch this or you missed the start, it'll be available, same link, just a couple of seconds after we've finished today. So you can share it with friends and family and spread the word within your networks far and wide. So thank you very much again to the panel. That's it for today. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SustMeme. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.